In the previous video, we detected the strong scent of smoke, and we were clearly able to observe the distinct, wispy, thin gray thread gradually making its way from beneath the closed kitchen door. But today the glorious sun has truly come out, and the bright daylight is incredibly cruel because it leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination at all. Today we're going to open the doors. We're going to go into the rooms of your house. Well, wait, you know what I mean. This is just an example. We're going to try to peek into the various intricate rooms of your body, and we're going to try to thoroughly figure out precisely what might be happening after that silent, insidious fire that's more than likely burning deeply and persistently inside you, causing potential damage. But not just that, it's even worse. The profound and powerful fire that has most likely been quietly burning deep inside you for many, many years, perhaps even decades, is now ready to be unleashed. What we're about to see probably won't be pleasant because we're going to find charred beams, blackened walls, and sparking electrical systems. In other words, we're going to see a lot of villains, if we can call them that, a lot. But we'll also meet the sheriff. He's there, he exists, and he's doing his job. We're also going to understand something even more profoundly unsettling. Many of these potential and significant damages we'll soon discover didn't just suddenly appear. Not just because deep inside you, your own body's defenses start attacking senselessly and without any discernible reason, but also because the intricate system that was specifically supposed to stop these initial attacks, which were only defensive in their very first stages, possibly stopped doing so as well, leaving you vulnerable. And when a system truly loses its essential brakes for many, many years, in other words, when there's absolutely no one present to effectively stop some fiercely protective defenders who in their earnest attempts to protect ultimately end up destroying everything. The extensive damage we might potentially find can no longer be accurately called a mere accident and is only, as I explicitly mentioned in a previous video presentation, a direct and unavoidable consequence. It's very simple. You were driving your car down the road without brakes, and suddenly you had an accident. Of course you had an accident. That you went off the road and crashed into a tree. That wasn't an accident. As you can understand, what it was is simply the consequence of driving down the road without brakes. Well, this is the same thing. All right, let's continue. On the other hand, and just to set a bit of context, let me tell you that I'm not going to talk to you about cold statistics or explain things like that. What I'm going to do is try to explain to you why today it was hard for you to get out of bed, or why that name that was on the tip of your tongue just wouldn't come to you, you couldn't remember it. Or also why your heart sometimes seems to beat with fear. If you're over the age of 45, this isn't merely a video about biology. Instead, it's a detailed map of what could potentially become your own potential ruins. But please don't be afraid or overly surprised, because to effectively rebuild a house, the very first and most crucial thing you truly need is the profound courage to squarely look the extensive damage directly in the face and clearly know precisely what absolutely needs to be repaired and exactly how it should be done. Let's get to it. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, I'm going to show you that even if the walls are blackened, the foundations, your foundations, are still intact. Let's start on the outside with the facade. The aged face, the wrinkled arm. Do you clearly see the wrinkles? Cosmetics tell you that. The passage of time is to blame, but I tell you that's not true, that it's causality. In other words, there are causes that provoke it, and maybe age isn't one of the most important ones. Your collagen doesn't just give up, it gets burned. Chronic inflammation is like a kind of blowtorch that hardens fibers that used to be elastic. In other words, your skin is the chronicle of an internal fire. How many times have you seen people with lots of wrinkles and others of the same age whose skin is still smooth as if they were much younger? Are you sure? And have you met people like that? And now you can understand it and pay attention. It's not genetics. It's just a simple blowtorch that's either completely off or entirely on. I'll just leave that with you. Now let's go down to the basement and talk about the sewage system of your kidneys and your liver. They're your best filters, and it turns out they're overloaded by the waste that zombie cells keep releasing. This is definitely something you need to pay attention to, because it's not that your organs have gotten old. It's that without knowing it, and probably without even imagining it, you've got them clogged up. And now, for a brief moment, let's truly just focus intently on the blood, the vital fluid. In a healthy house, water flows smoothly and freely. Okay? But in an inflamed, unhealthy body, in contrast, blood becomes much thicker and less fluid. Like honey. And do you know, or can you imagine, how hard it is for your heart to push honey all the way to your fingertips? Well, a lot more than you think. And now, pay attention to this other piece of information I'm going to give you. Blood doesn't get thick because of fat. Some people say, and you may have heard, that it's because of cholesterol, but no, it turns out it thickens because the water that sustains it, the living water that flows through your body, has lost its structure. It has stopped being a liquid crystal charged with energy, which should even propel itself, and I'll talk more about this later. Instead, it has become a heavy, voltageless liquid that stagnates. It's very likely that your transport system has lost its electrical vitality. And it does have it. It has electrical vitality. Although you probably didn't know that, but I'll explain it to you as well. And in this case, I'll do it in the next video. Well, all of this might seem to you like it's starting to become a list of different problems. But they're not. The skin, the internal organs, the blood. In reality, they're just different ways of seeing the same loss. The loss of control over the system. Now, let's ascend to the most important and significant room, which is the roof of the house, that is, your brain. Because here, this is where the damage becomes personal, because this is where our identity is stolen from us. I'm quite sure you've undoubtedly heard that you absolutely need to drink plenty of refreshing water because it's incredibly important to consistently stay well hydrated, especially as you gracefully age past the age of 40 or even 50, since at those particular ages, the human body often doesn't effectively signal its natural thirst anymore. And it's you who has to take care of it yourself. It turns out that you are the one who has to make sure you drink the amount of water your body needs. I'm sure nothing I'm telling you here is surprising. You've been told that you need to stay properly hydrated, and well, you do it and drink as much as you can. But they haven't told you clearly what exactly properly hydrated means. You've probably also heard that the amount of water you need to take in each day depends on your body type. That is, whether you're small or large, and that for some people it might be 1.5 liters of water, and for others more, but that it usually shouldn't be more than 2.5 liters. I'm sure you know all this, but maybe you haven't heard, or no one has explained to you that drinking water is not the same as hydrating yourself. Just drinking water, sometimes all it does is flood your house. Don't be surprised. You see, your brain is an electrical network. It's not like an electrical network. No. It is an electrical network. Your every thought, your entire memory, every single command to move a finger or any other part of your body, all of that is essentially an electrical impulse. In fact, if you could somehow connect a very small light bulb directly to your brain, the bulb would indeed light up, demonstrating this incredible electrical activity. Scientists, in fact, and you surely know this, measure your brain activity precisely through these electrical waves you have that flow through your brain. And in the case of the brain, which is what we're talking about, they do it using electroencephalograms. But for example, also, and so you really understand that our body is an electrical network, when you get an electrocardiogram, what doctors are doing is measuring electrical activity. Well then, now let's get to the absolutely crucial point I truly want to highlight and emphasize. For the electrical signal to effectively jump from one individual neuron to another adjacent neuron, it fundamentally needs a highly efficient and specialized conductive medium or pathway. If you bear in mind that the human body is mostly composed of water, and you recall that water itself is not a very effective conductor of electricity, then consider that it is essential to do something in order to make sure it is. Especially if what you drink is purified water or tap water. By tap water, I mean the water that comes to you through your municipal pipes, which is usually saturated with chemicals like chlorine, whose purpose is to prevent the development of pathogens that could infect you. In other words, there is a positive intention behind it. But it turns out that this kind of water is somewhat like water without voltage, or dead water. And your brain, whether you realize it or not, and just as I've just explained, actually works with electricity. And for electricity to flow properly through your body, the perfect tool to transmit it is water. But for water to be a good conductor of electricity, it needs minerals, which in the specific case of water are salts. It needs what in science and biology are called electrolytes. And it's precisely those essential electrolytes, or those vital mineral salts, if you want to put it in a more straightforward and understandable way, that truly make water exceptionally and remarkably highly conductive. And here's another fascinating and profound secret that has remained hidden for a very long time, and only quite recently has science truly begun to reveal it in its entirety. It turns out that the water inside your cells isn't H2O. It's something much more complex. We'll talk about this in the next video, as I just mentioned, but pay attention to this. If you drink purified or chlorinated water, which is therefore stripped of minerals, what you're basically doing is forcing your body to compensate for that lack of minerals you're not getting from the water in order to dilute that empty water you're taking in. And therefore your body is critically forced to utilize its own essential internal salts to meticulously maintain proper cellular balance, meaning it effectively starts drawing upon the vital electrolytes it has carefully stored in reserve for its crucial functions. So, unintentionally, the more you consistently drink this particular kind of what I have referred to as dead water, the more you will gradually and significantly dilute the essential connectivity between your vital neurons. A brain without electrolytes is like a drained battery. The lights flicker, memory fails, and mental fog settles in your head. This is the key to truly staying hydrated. Remember this information and start applying it from now on if you aren't already. And now, before we continue, let me clarify something important. All that I meticulously do and genuinely care about in these comprehensive videos is to simply present factual data and publicly available statements, so that you, utilizing your own discerning judgment and critical thinking, can ultimately draw your very own well-informed conclusions. Science, in its true essence, is absolutely not about blindly believing. Rather, science is fundamentally about diligently observing, thoroughly studying, and rigorously analyzing. And I mention this particular point because now I am going to talk to you in considerable detail about a truly dangerous, highly controversial, and often misunderstood intruder, an element that has both passionate defenders and equally vocal detractors. And I am specifically referring to aluminum, which is widely known and frequently described as the false conductor, a material with a complex and often debated reputation in various industries and applications. In a healthy brain, communication between neurons depends on biological electrolytes. As I've told you, sodium, potassium, magnesium, these are the official conductors that allow electricity to flow in a controlled and precise manner. They are the key to the functioning of your brain and your body. And yet, I just called aluminum the false conductor. And I called it that for 3 reasons. Critical reasons that you should know about. The very first thing, let's carefully call it chemical mimicry, or if you prefer, the clever imposter. That's what we're discussing. Aluminum is an imitator. Because of its electric charge and atomic size, the body mistakes it for other essential metals like iron or magnesium, and the brain lets it in, thinking it's a necessary mineral that will help. But what happens then? Once inside the human body, aluminum, a non-essential element, doesn't fulfill the vital functions the body inherently expected it to perform. Instead, it simply takes up valuable space and actively blocks essential metabolic processes. We could say it's a rather clever kind of illusionist that truly causes the body to believe one thing, but then actually delivers something much, much worse. The second reason I call it the false conductor is because of its uncontrolled conductivity. That is to say, aluminum is something like the master of short circuits. Notice that I said short circuit. Unlike essential electrolytes, which efficiently carry electrical signals from one point A to another point B, precisely following the intricate neuron's instructions, aluminum, in contrast, is a highly reactive and volatile metal. Think of electrolytes, for example, as insulated electrical wires that bring electricity to a bright light bulb in a similar way. However, when the element used is aluminum, in contrast to what electrolytes offer you, what this ultimately achieves is something akin to dropping a large bare metal sheet directly onto an exposed open electrical circuit, which is certainly not ideal. It causes sparks, and that translates into oxidative stress in all directions. It doesn't conduct information. What it does is conduct toxicity. It disrupts the electric field of the neuronal membrane and contaminates the signal. And this is what creates that mental fog we've talked about on other occasions. And it's more than likely that you've experienced it yourself if you're of a certain age. And now let's move on to the third reason. It's based on the fact that it causes accumulation. It's something like, you could call it the rust of the system. While water and electrolytes flow and are renewed, aluminum is very difficult to eliminate from nervous tissue. It gets deposited and becomes stuck in the proteins. It's the same thing that happens with tau protein or beta amyloid. And I'm specifically mentioning these two to you because it's key for you to understand that Alzheimer's, and here we reach an important point in this video, is not a genetic lottery, but rather a process of accumulating biological waste. The tau protein, or alternatively beta amyloid, are the usual and indeed primary suspects in any comprehensive forensic report concerning the intricate workings of the brain, and it turns out quite significantly that aluminum is the crucial catalyst that ultimately makes these substances so profoundly dangerous. Even though we're stepping outside the scope of this video for a moment, I think it's worth pausing for a couple of minutes, so I can explain why. Ultimately, Alzheimer's is a risk that should concern all of us, and it probably does. Well then, first I'll talk to you about beta amyloid. It's kind of like the trash in the hallway, the garbage that's in the hallway. Think about the number of neurons we have, and imagine that each neuron in your brain is like a house. on a very narrow street. Like any living house, neurons produce waste every day. Beta amyloid isn't some external harmful poison. It's simply the regular everyday trash bag that the neuron diligently takes and carefully puts out by the door, just like you would with your household waste. In a young brain, the garbage truck, that is, the lymphatic system and the cleaning cells that come built into the system, comes by every night, picks up those bags, and takes them away. And the street, which is the extracellular space, stays clean, and the neighbors, which are the other neurons, can simply communicate across the sidewalk without any problems. Everything works perfectly, but what happens when the garbage starts to pile up on that street we mentioned, which is narrow? Well, if the system that regulates inflammation, that is, the Tregs cells and the FOXP3 gene, fails, I'll talk more about them later, the body enters a state of absolute chaos. As I said, I'll talk to you in a few minutes about the importance of these Tregs cells and FOXP3, but let's go back to the garbage trucks. If the body enters into chaos, your lymphatic system stops working properly. In other words, the garbage trucks stop coming by. Or even worse, they start causing fires in the street to force their way through. The garbage bags, the beta amyloid, start piling up one on top of another outside the houses, and over time, something that at first was just a nuisance ends up turning into solid walls. The final result of this problem is the complete isolation of the neurons. And you see, when beta amyloid clumps together on the outside, three effects occur. The first, as I mentioned before, is that the connection is cut off. The neurons can no longer send messages to each other, which is what we call synapses, because they are faced with a wall of hardened waste between them. The second is suffocation. The neuron becomes isolated from nutrients and blood. And the third, and this is where aluminum comes in, is the glue effect. As we saw before, if there is aluminum, when that particular metal is present in the system, it effectively functions like a strong resin that solidifies the garbage bags, making it virtually impossible for the human body to properly expel them from its system. In a young and healthy brain, regulatory glial cells and other cleaning systems come in and remove that waste. But beta amyloid is a protein that, due to breaking or cleaning errors, simply starts to clump together on the outside of neurons. A young body with a healthy lymphatic system is obviously able to take care of the problem and resolve it. But it's not the same. As the years go by, the waste accumulates and the lymphatic system, in a way, starts to weaken and its capacity decreases. And you might say, but wait, what does that have to do with anything? All of this, what does it have to do with aluminum? And what role does aluminum play in this whole matter? Well, aluminum acts like a chemical glue. It binds to all these proteins and causes them to clump together faster and more tightly, forming plaques that completely suffocate communication between neurons. If there's no aluminum, the body can clear out the amyloid, but with aluminum, the amyloid turns into real cement. And now let's pause for a moment on the other one, the tau protein, the one that's called the broken rails protein. If amyloid attacks from the outside, the tau protein destroys from the inside, within the cells. Neurons have a kind of tubules that are like train tracks along which they transport nutrients. Well, tau protein is what keeps those tracks straight and stable. And here, once again, aluminum appears. What it specifically does within your body is to actively trigger a complex biological reaction that is technically and precisely known as hyperphosphorylation. Basically, what happens is that the tau protein becomes deformed and detaches from the tracks. When the tracks fall apart, the tau coils up on itself and forms tangles. And what is the result of those tangles that are formed? The individual neuron is left completely without essential supplies and consequently begins to die from the inside out. Aluminum in this context acts as a potent killer. It is a silent and insidious one that significantly accelerates this detrimental process of internal cellular dismantling. The problem isn't just that aluminum is there, the problem is that your brain tries to use it to conduct electricity because it's missing the right minerals. Going back to what I said before, this is the issue with good or bad hydration. And what happens is that aluminum, as I mentioned before, is a false conductor. It seems like it helps close the circuit, but what it actually does is cause a short circuit that ends up burning your memories. Think about your life and your surroundings for a moment. You find yourself surrounded by aluminum everywhere. It's in the very air, it's in your daily deodorants, it's in your kitchen, it's truly everywhere. Your brain, which is often dry, they become rancid much more quickly. That's why I told you it's like rust on cables. Rust doesn't actually help the electrical current to flow. What it effectively does is actively resist it and ultimately ends up destroying the delicate cable, and therefore, as a direct consequence, ends up completely blocking the crucial signal. This is very important. You see, they say that Alzheimer's is a kind of diabetes, stress in development. I tell you, it's a brain that has lost its ability to clean itself and to conduct electricity. You're losing power, not memory. Soon I'll dedicate a specific video to Alzheimer's because I think it's something that concerns us all. But now comes the big surprise. Our human body truly is a remarkable and intricate box of countless surprises. Just a few minutes ago, I briefly mentioned the significant problem that can potentially arise if the crucial brakes within our system were to completely fail. And perhaps you were left genuinely wondering, which specific brakes is he actually talking about? Well, you see, the incredibly complex and powerful immune system is, by its very fundamental nature, a formidable weapon of mass destruction. It destroys everything. Now think about two types of cells. On one hand, there are the so-called T effector cells, which are essentially like highly specialized assault soldiers, meticulously programmed to identify and eliminate anything they do not recognize as part of the body, acting as a crucial defense mechanism. Their main mission is to attack and destroy any possible threat. Invaders, pathogens, cancer cells, everything. These are cells that make up a defense army which, if left unregulated, can lead to total destruction because they have no limits. And on the other hand, there are the regulatory T cells, or Tregs, which are like the high command. Their only job is to put the brakes on the T effector cells, which are the first ones. And it's as if they were that master brake, or if you want to put it in more familiar terms, like UN peacekeepers trying to restore order in the midst of a war. Their mission is not to attack, but to contain and regulate the response of the T effector cells. To put it simply, they're like the ones in charge of saying, "Thank you, that's enough. This is as far as we go." And in this way, they prevent the defender's attack from becoming chronic or destroying the body's own tissues because they go all out. The crucial gene, FOXP3, which emerges again in our biological system, is the vital central signal that enables Tregs to effectively exist and function. This should leave you with a truly unambiguous message. Without Treg cells, and only with the conventional T cells, the body would quite literally disintegrate in a mere span of days. These incredibly important Tregs are precisely what are known as the master brake and protective. They have the hierarchical authority to stop three processes that would otherwise be fatal. The first thing they stop is friendly fire, self-aggression. As I was saying, the immune system is designed to kill anything it doesn't recognize. And what's the problem? Well, the problem is actually quite serious. In the heat of battle, the soldiers, that is, these effector cells, often get confused. Thank you. And they mistake parts of your own body, like the cartilage in your joints or the insulation of your nerves, called myelin, and consider them potential invaders. So they open fire. This is what has always been called friendly fire. Your own allies end up taking you down. They're part of you and they shoot at you. So what do Tregs do when they detect this mistake? They disconnect, and they do it physically, the aggressive soldiers, before they destroy your own tissue. But here's something important. Without the FOXP3 gene, there is no ceasefire order. The second process they stop is that they halt the cytokine storm. When there's an infection, the body releases certain chemical substances called cytokines, which their purpose is to call in more troops. It's like a kind of chain reaction that gets set in motion. Well, what Tregs do is absorb and neutralize these chemical signals so that the inflammation simply doesn't become systemic. What they do is prevent what starts as a small fire in the kitchen, which could be a local infection in a finger or a leg, from ending up burning down the whole house. In other words, they prevent things like multi-organ failure from occurring, for example. The third process they stop is unnecessary energy expenditure. It's very easy to understand. Keeping an army on high alert consumes a huge amount of ATP, which we talked about in the previous video. Remember, it's like the currency that organs use to buy energy. And it's produced by mitochondria, which are like little power plants. But anyway, what exactly do Tregs stop? Well, once the threat has passed, what Tregs do is order a withdrawal. If they didn't act, your body would keep spending energy on a war that's already over. That's why, when the master break fails, you feel that chronic and inexplicable fatigue. Basically, your body is trying to fund a war that's actually just a phantom war. If you've diligently followed me this far, then you truly deserve today's special prize for your outstanding scientific and biological curiosity. And now, I'm going to thoroughly explain it all to you in a much more casual and approachable way, just between you and me, in a friendly conversation. Now take a moment to deeply consider all the complex biological and intricate neurological problems that are frequently caused by our current lack of comprehensive understanding of the many vital processes that are naturally set in motion within our human bodies as we progressively grow and develop. That lack of understanding leads to poor communication and also to the development of defense mechanisms on the part of our cells. In previous videos, we've seen how this defense mechanism can even lead to a true metabolic death. Just look at the situation we're in. And up until now, as we've been going over all these ruins, many might think something as specific as our immune system has gone crazy. The body has started firing uncontrollably, and the problem seems to be a rampaging army that can't be stopped. But modern science has forced us to correct that idea. In many cases, the problem isn't that there are too many soldiers. The problem is that there aren't enough breaks. Inside your body, there is a very special type of cell I've told you about, whose mission is not to attack, destroy, or defend. Their job is simply different. It's to prevent the rest of the army from targeting the wrong objective. They're like the famous blue helmets I mentioned, who don't go to war, but regulate patrolling inside your blood. They don't fight. What they do is separate and contain. Basically, they prevent those soldiers you have whose job is to defend from attacking civilians in the midst of chaos. And by civilians, I mean your own organs. And this is the importance of Tregs, the regulatory T cells. Well, when those breaks fail, and they do fail, the war stops being external and starts inside. And that's when when the damage stops being invisible and starts to affect the internal structure of the house. But we still have a little bit further to go. Let's proceed down to the main pipes. Specifically, let's descend to the very heart of the system. We've been told that it's a pressure pump, but what if I told you that the heart couldn't move all that honey-like blood you have throughout your body on its own, unless the water in your arteries had the correct electric charge? When the pipe cracks because it becomes inflamed, and I'm talking about the vessels through which blood flows, not only do we lose blood, but more importantly, we lose the voltage that makes life flow. Cholesterol, a waxy fat-like substance, comes in as a temporary patch, a quick fix, but the real underlying problem is that the vital flow of essential nutrients and oxygen is stopping because the internal crucial water within the system has effectively died, leading to significant dysfunction. Cholesterol is not the enemy, it's the firefighter. And attacking cholesterol and making it disappear without putting out the fire of inflammation is like firing the firefighters while your house is burning. This video is getting a bit long and I don't want to go off on too many tangents, but I will make a video for you about cholesterol and the importance of its function. And now let's talk about your joints when you become stiff. It's not that your bones wear out from use, no. If you walk through the countryside, you'll see stones that have been there for 1,000 years or more. What's happening to you is that you're oxidizing. Inflammation eats away your synovial fluid, which is the lubricant, and your bones don't. They creak not because they're old, but because they're dry and hot. In other words, you've lost biological flexibility because your structure is under constant attack. Again, what a bleak outlook. Well, let's take a little break because all of this really does come across as a true drama. Let's pause for a moment. Up to this point, I've told you about many things that cause harm, real villains if you want to call them that. We've seen inflammation and the effects of that inflammation. We've seen chaos, we've seen damaged organs, broken pipes, and systems that no longer respond well. And it's normal that, seeing all this, someone would think something very specific. My body has gone crazy. My immune system is firing out of control, and this is a war that makes no sense and has no possible victory. But this is where modern science has taken a turn and changed everything that for decades was believed, that when the body attacked itself, the immune system was simply failing and becoming aggressive. And that's why it was firing out of control. That was the classic explanation given by medicine and science. But in the late 1990s and early 2000s, several research teams working independently in Japan, the United States, and Europe began to notice that there was something that didn't fit with that idea. Over the many preceding years, the significant and groundbreaking results of this extensive research ultimately culminated in the momentous announcement on the 6th day of October in the year 2025 that these dedicated and brilliant researchers had been deservedly awarded the prestigious Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for that remarkable year 2025. And all of this was for their discoveries about peripheral immune tolerance, and specifically for identifying regulatory T cells, Tregs, and the crucial role of the FOXP3 gene, which I have mentioned to you. Mary Branca and Fred Ramsdell were the ones who identified FOXP3, that is, the instruction manual, and Simon Sakaguchi identified the cells, in other words, the peacekeepers. Well, what this prize has done is shed light, thank you, on a truth that we actually suspected. It's not that our bodies lack strength, but rather that we lack biological diplomacy, meaning learning how to manage these processes. And now I'll tell you a bit about the process they went through to achieve the prize. One of the key studies was led by the Japanese immunologist Seimon Sakaguchi. He meticulously studied numerous mice that developed severe and debilitating autoimmune diseases, and the truly surprising thing wasn't that their immune system was inherently weak. The profoundly surprising revelation was that they had completely lost a very specific and crucial type of cell, a particular kind of cell, responsible for effectively restraining the other immune cells. Shortly after this significant discovery, pioneering teams like that of the esteemed Mary Branco in the United States successfully identified the crucial central signal that made this essential restraint possible, a specific genetic signal without which the entire immune system simply doesn't know how to effectively hold itself back and maintain proper balance. Ultimately, what they discovered was something completely revolutionary. The immune system doesn't work only with accelerators, it works above all with the immune system, with brakes. And when those brakes are missing, the system doesn't go crazy. It does exactly what it knows how to do, but it does it without limits. This master brake depends on a central signal, FOXP3, which is not a cell that attacks, does not destroy pathogens, does not produce antibodies. FOXP3 is the signal that allows regulatory cells to exist, which are ultimately responsible for telling the rest of the immune system, this far and no further. This yes and this no. In other words, it's the biological equivalent of a sheriff who doesn't fight on the front lines, but decides when an intervention becomes an abuse, and also decides at what point the defense starts to damage the body's own tissues and therefore needs to stop. When FOXP3 works well, the immune system is powerful and precise. It defends without destroying, repairs without ravaging. But when that signal weakens, goes silent, or is altered, something very important happens. The inflammation stops shutting off. The attack is no longer a one-time event, and the damage becomes chronic. And not because the body is broken, but because it has lost the ability to set limits for itself. That's what happens. It's what we're seeing in these ruins we've reviewed in this video. And it's not bad luck, nor is it an isolated mistake. What it is a system that has gone too long without brakes. And keep this idea in mind because it's key. This discovery completely changed the way we understand inflammation, autoimmunity, and aging. For years, people only looked at the soldiers, the weapons, the attacks, and science was forgetting something essential, that without brakes, any system eventually collapses. As I was saying, this shift in perspective is completely revolutionizing the way we understand inflammation, autoimmune diseases, and aging itself. Because now we know that the body doesn't age just from wear and tear, but rather it ages due to a loss of regulation, and that completely changes the map of our aging. Well, now I'd really like you to fully understand precisely why this particular aspect is so incredibly important. When we talk about an immune system without brakes, we're not talking about something abstract. We're talking about very, very specific and often debilitating diseases. These include rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, inflammatory bowel diseases, and psoriasis, among others. These conditions can significantly impact a person's quality of life. For years, we have treated them as different problems, as different organs, as different symptoms. But this discovery has forced us to look at all of them from the same perspective. Not as diseases where the body makes a mistake, which is probably what you've heard if you have one of them, but as situations in which the system that was supposed to put the brakes on the attack simply isn't working properly. In many of these cases, what we observe is not an excess of immune system strength, but a loss of regulation. An inability of the system to say enough. And this also doesn't mean that all autoimmune diseases are the same, because they're not, or that they have a simple solution, because they don't. But it does mean something very important. The body is not trying to destroy itself for no reason. It is trying to defend itself, but it's doing so without limits. And when you truly comprehend that profound insight, it completely changes the entire way you perceive the disease, and also, crucially, the way you search for effective and lasting solutions. You shouldn't approach it from a place of constant warfare, but rather from the recovery of control. And when the problem isn't the attack, but the lack of restraint, the question is no longer just what needs to be fought, but how to restore regulation. I know that what we've discussed today is heavy. I know that looking at the ruins of our own home is not pleasant. But before we go, I want you to take a moment with me to look back, a moment to review the path we've traveled. In the first video of this series, we talked about DNA, about the spark that ignited the process. In the second video, we talked about the engine of the mitochondria and about zombie cells. And in the third video, about the smoke, which is this inflammation. Well, in this fourth video, we've talked about the damage, the manifestation of the damage. And we have moved from the molecule we started with in DNA to the symptom. You see, the other day, I was talking to a friend who told me sadly, Jose Maria, it's just that I'm getting older and it's normal for my knees to start failing. I looked him in the eyes and told him something I'd like you to really take to heart. I said, yes, it's common, but it's not normal. Also, something very similar happened to me. There was a particular time when my knees ached so very much, and I felt quite restricted in my movement, that I truly considered I'd eventually have to receive titanium knees. One of my sisters had done it, and it seemed to be working for her. But I was incredibly fortunate to meet someone who opened my eyes and explained something very similar to what I'm explaining to you today. I bought myself a brand new elliptical bike and then commenced exercising regularly on a consistent basis with my knees. Since then, I think it's been more than 10 years now, and I haven't had any pain again. Neither in my knees nor in my joints. And let me tell you one more thing. In my family, everywhere, on my father's side and on my mother's side, there have been cases of arthritis and especially rheumatoid arthritis. Well, up to now, and thank God, it hasn't come back for me. Don't accept physical decline as your ultimate fate. Accepting damage truly is brave, but resigning yourself to merely living among the desolate ruins is, in essence, the very beginning of dying while still alive. And I refuse to let you resign yourself. We have successfully finished the comprehensive damage inspection. It was incredibly hard to clearly see the severely charred beams and the dangerously exposed wires, but now you thoroughly know many of the significant cracks, and you might be fully ready to truly understand why a complete rebuilding effort is indeed possible. In the upcoming video, we won't talk about medical topics or treatments. I'm going to tell you how the body fundamentally uses water for its essential survival. This is purely foundational body biology. I'm going to show you that your body is not a simple mechanical system made of flesh, complex and intricate as it may be, but rather it is a remarkable human battery. We're going to discover why the water you drink has nothing to do with the water that lives inside your cells. And we're going to talk about the fourth phase of water, about how sunlight recharges you and why that happens. A brilliant French doctor with an innovative approach saved countless thousands of lives by carefully injecting purified seawater into his ailing patients. Get ready, because in the very next video presentation, we're going to thoroughly discover the profound secret of this remarkable living water and precisely how to finally turn on the illuminating lights of your inner cathedral once and for all, forever transforming your understanding. True energy is now about to erupt forth imminently. I invite you to keep exploring with me this extraordinary universe that is the world of our longevity and our body. And I encourage you to keep moving forward, as I always say, always forward.